Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to our upgrade and commander build video on this Saturday. And I hope this finds you doing well. Today we're going to be looking at the Tier 9 German cruiser, the Roon. So we're going to talk about the ship just in general, or look at her armor, modules, upgrades, combat signals, consumables, and most importantly, the commander. So, there will be timestamps here at the bottom of the video, so just feel free to skip to whatever parts you feel are most relevant in what you're seeking from this video. So, in starting off here, we need to talk about what type of cruiser is Roon. So you have these long-range cruisers, you have these brawling cruisers with secondary builds, and you have medium-range cruisers. And probably what I'm going to tell you, similar to what I shared with Hipper, is that she's a mid-range cruiser. And what I mean by that is typically they go off or roughly around concealment, but in my mind, mid-range can be between that 12 to 15 kilometer. More precisely, I would say around the 12 kilometer mark in terms of mid-range for a cruiser. Battleship that's beginning to getting brawling range, right? But she's this mid-range cruiser with amazing HE, with really good AP on these 203mm guns. She has some tricks up her sleeve that enables her to brawl. She does well playing at that medium range of, let's say, 12 kilometers, even further back. But then she also does this kiting roll really well because of her main battery. 2 of her 3 turrets are on the stern, aft end of the ship. So a lot of time you see Roon players who are getting more into these kiting angles, and it's just because they want to bring the majority of their firepower to bear. Where Roon not so great at just pushing straight in, unless you're utilizing islands to get the torpedoes off. So in yesterday's video, you saw me playing the kiting roll of Roon, pretty much the majority of the battle to the very end when we needed to push in. And that's just how she plays. Now, in terms of her armor layout, we have some things going on here. A lot of different armor sections you're seeing here. So your bow is 27mm, 27mm down here as well, just separate sections. But then you have a 40mm section here, so it kind of helps protect Citadel, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And then you have an even stronger casemate armor belt of 100mm here. So she does have this protection when she does push in for players who are targeting, trying to punch within your Citadel. So she does come with some, I would say, a buff to push in, even although she only has one of her 3 main battery turrets in front of the ship. Going throughout, you can see a lot of 27mm, even the torpedo protection all throughout. Now, in terms of her kiting, 27mm stern, aft in, and then 80mm down here. So she has some additional armor to help, but it's not amazing in terms when we're talking about kiting. Now, sometimes what I like to see on like kiting type cruisers and how you play is maybe some thicker deck armor, but Roon is covered with 27mm throughout, so not as resilient to high explosive focus that you're going to take, in addition to this larger superstructure that you have. Now I'm going to take some things away. I do need to mention, like Hipper, you do get a turtleback armor scheme here. So it's going to help deflect some of those shots towards your Citadel, just up into just beginning fold pins instead. You can see you have another torpedo bulkhead in addition to the, where'd it go? Oh, back here, I'm guessing. This 27mm protection side plating. And 110mm. So you're not talking about those front panel that's right here, right? So if I put it back on, that's just helping protect players doing something like what you see players doing on a Yamato, punching straight in forward to the Citadel and bypassing that armor scheme that you have that sits over your Citadel. Okay, as you zoom out here, your Citadel is above waterline. Again, it is a turtleback. So you can see 40mm down here, 40mm, excuse me, and 110, 80 on the back. So you just need to be conscious of that. Now, in terms of her turrets, when we talk about her turret armor scheme, 150 millimeter, 90, 90, 105, 70 on the back, 90. So naturally for most turrets, the top tends to be the weakest. Now that's not always the case, it varies. But it's good to see that you have that 150 millimeter on the front and helping protect your guns. So we're going to talk about that with the skill. Now let me just show you the position of the torpedoes. Let me zoom in here. So those torpedoes do sit outside of the ship. They're not like within the hull of the ship or anything like that. So you do need to be mindful, right? They can be purposely targeted and incapacitated. So now let's go ahead and talk about the, modules. So you have 3 modules to upgrade. The first, what I'm going to tell you to upgrade is the hull. Let's just talk about the hull real quick. So hull A, without survivability expert, as we have with survivability expert, 47,450. With the upgraded hull, 53,550. So that's really nice. I like running survivability expert on most of my cruisers these days. Just helping you have that last impact as the battle goes on, and making some key decisions, key plays, right? AA defense does get a buff as well, going up to 75. And then the other buff that you get is to the maneuverability, pretty standard when you upgrade the hull. So I just advise going for this first because it's going to increase your overall survivability. Next, I would probably encourage you to go for the guns. So now we have the main battery modification 3 in the 6th slot. So right now that gives us a reload time of 9.2. Now if I gave it up, our reload time would be reduced to 11.4 in terms of giving up the upgraded main battery module. And then even worse, like I think it's like 13 seconds or something like that if I give up main battery modification 3. So overall you're just improving your gun performance to have this 9.2 second reload time and 180 turn time of 22.5 seconds. Maximum HE shell damage 2,500. Maximum AP shell damage 5,900. So we'll talk a little more about the high explosive armor piercing as time comes. The torpedoes, you have 4 per side, so 8 total. Torpedo range of 6 kilometers, maximum damage 13,700, speed of 64 knots, reload time 90 seconds. So these aren't necessarily torpedoes you just keep spamming, it's just for those close quarters situations when you're pushing in. The detectability range is 1.3 kilometers, so relatively stealthy-ish, it's okay, but you know, if you as a player see a Roon coming within 6 kilometers, 7 kilometers, you can be pretty certain that they fired their torpedoes at you. In terms of the gunfire control system, your stock main battery firing range is 16.2 kilometers. Your upgraded gunfire control system range is 17.8 kilometers. So that's 0.1 kilometers more than Hipper in terms of the just in general main battery firing range. Now Hipper doesn't get access to the spotter plane. You do here on Roon, we will talk about that. Propulsion, I'll take some things away here. 32.5 knots, you can get the propulsion up to 34.1 knots if you so desire. Now in terms of the upgrades, the first one I'm going to recommend is main armaments modification 1. This reduces the risk of our main battery and torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. Main battery torpedo tube survivability plus 50%. Main battery repair time and torpedo tube repair time negative 20%. So I was referencing how those torpedoes are exposed. Sometimes that's your ace up the sleeve, right? When you're brawling in, pushing up, or you have a movie destroyer who's run up on you, whatever. It's an ace up the sleeve. So between the guns and torpedoes, I like to build into them and have them operational. I'm not going to talk about auxiliary armaments modification 1. Magazine modification 1, never need if you're playing randoms or ranked clan battles. You just take that Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. Now another skill we could talk about is the spotting aircraft, or upgrade, spotting aircraft modification 1. This increases the action time of the spotting aircraft and rapid takeoff spotter consumables, so you get an additional 30% on your action time. I'll talk a little bit more about that with a commander skill. So that is optional, but that means if you really want this skill, you're talking about playing outside your 17.8 kilometers rather regularly, and I don't think that's so much worth it I mean, you saw the devastation we were having to deal with yesterday, right? He was knocking out my torpedoes quite frequently. Granted that your torpedo tube hit points are RNG based, so they're not a fixed number, and with how Wargaming has the mechanics built into that. So I do like being able to add whatever hit points, the survivability that I guess I can to the torpedoes. Now for the second slot, if you don't have coal and you're just looking at one of these two main regular upgrades, I'd probably encourage you to go for the engine room protection. This reduces the risk of your engine and steering gears becoming incapacitated by -20%. Repair time reduced by -20% for both of those. Otherwise, if you do have the coal to spare, I would recommend taking the Hydroacoustic Search Modification 1. This increases the action time of the Hydroacoustic Search and Short-Range Hydroacoustic Search Consumables. Consumable action time plus 20%. So you can see that already, I think it takes our Hydro from 120 to 144 seconds. We can take this other combat signal, add 10% on 158.4 seconds on the action time of our Hydroacoustic Search. So I really like having that. Trying to have Hydro, even helping, like yesterday's video example, we had a Gato and a Shumikaze. So just trying to help my team in having that. And it's also very helpful just for you to avoid taking unnecessary damage from torpedoes when you can spot them and move out of the way. Because this is the German Hydro, right? So that's my main recommendation. Second recommendation. Third slot, there's two options you could do here. I've gone for the Aiming Systems Modification 1. I'll throw it up on the right side of the screen. Your maximum main battery shell dispersion was reduced by -7%. This means we're getting tighter vertical dispersion and tighter horizontal dispersion. Probably it'll be between 5 to 10 meters is how much we're improving the accuracy when we take this. I like this a lot. It just makes me feel like my shell grouping is tighter, especially when you're firing maybe at longer ranges, or you're trying to get those nice juicy broadside citadel shots with your armor piercing on respective ships that you can citadel rather easily with these 2 and 3mm guns. So I like that. Now we do get a buff on our torpedo tubes, traverse speed plus 20%, and we get a buff to our secondaries, being the secondary battery firing range plus 5%, and the maximum secondary battery shell dispersion is reduced, so tighter shell groupings with our secondaries. Otherwise, players might be looking at the main battery modification 2. Now we've taken grease the gears, should have, I believe, on our commander. We'll look at that here in a minute. And this would mean that you'll be getting rid of that 22 point, well, what we have right now. We gotta go to this one. 22.5 seconds. So you'd be reducing that to like probably 19, maybe 20 second, 180 degree turn time, roughly that. I'm just guessing off the top of my head. So that would be another viable option to take. Now, for myself, I just try to think in advance when how I want to position my guns, when I'm positioning my ship, kiting, brawling, pushing in, whatever. So I don't mind. The 22.5 seconds is doable for me right now. But it's really between these two. These three are not worth building into. There's other cruisers you can get in the game at tier 9 that, even German, that perform that brawling role better. Now the fourth slot, I've taken the propulsion modification 1. Time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating, -15%. This was helpful. Particularly when you're kiting, which is, I feel like when I play a lot of Roon, I'm just doing that, but it's not, I'm constant running away. I'm sitting still, I'm accelerating, I'm deaccelerating, and this helps you avoid a lot of incoming fire from enemy ships. So I like having this a lot. I know some other players are like steering gears modification 1. You can try out what you feel is more preferable to you, but if you utilize the power of the WS key here in World of Warships with cruiser play, you will notice, I think overall, your game performance improving in terms of taking less damage. Okay, but you can try them both out. The damage control system modification 2, you're just reducing the duration of damage you are taking, right? So you have your flooding recovery time, fire extinguishing time, -15%. Okay, we have Hydro, helps us avoid torpedoes if we position well. Now it's another story when it comes to airdrop torpedoes from CV, since they can create crossfire at will. And then your fires, you know, you have your damage control party, but you're just trying to utilize it wise, right? So I don't lean towards this one so much, where I'd lean more towards propulsion modification first and foremost. Now, fifth slot, there's two ways you can look at equipping Roon. Here with the upgrades, you could go for this very gun Lighthouse build, right? I've gone for the traditional route so far with Hipper and Roon and Hindenburg, and I might try out a Lighthouse Hindenburg build. But if you're going for what's going to be best for the majority of players in the game, I would definitely recommend the Concealment System Modification 1, and reducing your ship's detectability range, squadron detectability range, and dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship plus 5%, meaning they have slightly worse dispersion when they're firing at your ship. And with concealment on our commander, it means that we have 11.3 kilometer conceal. This is quite helpful, especially when you've taken some big hits and you do need to go dark, heal back up, and then re-engage in the battle. So I've just really found it comfortable. I found this line very comfortable to play so far in going for a concealed build. Now, if you're looking at a Lighthouse build, then that means you're giving up concealment, and you do a Lighthouse build in order to maximize your DPM. We'll talk about that. You want to be detected with a Lighthouse build, and then here you take steering gears modification 2 in the 5th slot. I'd still take propulsion in the 4th slot, but I'd take steering gears modification 2 here in the 5th slot. Water shift time, negative 40%. Steering gears repair time, negative 80%. So on top of having the propulsion and then having a better rudder shift time, when we look at our maneuverability, 11.4 seconds, you know, you're reducing that quite drastically. It's nice, but it's a sweaty, try-hard build is what you're doing when you do a Lighthouse build. And I'm really more interested in trying it out on Hindenburg than I am Roon, because, you know, now at tier 9 you see super ships. And I'd rather have a one tier higher performance. Now the main battery modification 3 here in the 6th slot, this is what I prefer in having. So our reload time is 9.2 seconds. Main battery traverse speed, it is nerfed, so that is why we have the 22.5 second 180 return time on top of having greased the gears on our commander. So it's a bit of a trade-off, but we're getting more DPM performance out of our main battery guns. Other players might be looking at the gunfire control system modification 2, which extends your main battery firing range by plus 16%. I don't see as much of a use for it here on Roon. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't have its place. This is another time, if you really enjoy playing Roon and you see you're going to play it a lot, then maybe you experiment. Make the investment between these two and see what fits you best. I just think, in terms of the play style of Roon, when you start playing out beyond 17.8 kilometers, you know, you have access to spotter plane. We're going to talk about how even maximizing our spotting plane with our commander build. I'd just be kind of like, why? Why do you want to have a standard 20 kilometer main battery firing range all the time when you can increase your DPM performance? So that's my thoughts on these two. Others are not worth taking, in my opinion, here on the Roon. Now, armaments. So I talked about in yesterday's video, and I need to correct, again, a statement I made on the Hipper upgrade commander build video. You get quarter pin on the high explosive of the German cruisers. So I made a passing comment and that it said it was decent. No, the high explosive on the German cruiser line is really good. So standard, you get a 1.6 pin versus a 1.4 pin, meaning that we can pin 51 millimeters with our high explosive. That is really, really, really good. You know, and if you're going by a 1/6 value, right? So if you go 2 and 3 divided by 6 means we only pin 33 millimeter, but we pin 51 millimeter. So this is high explosive is really good. Also, that you can buff the fire chance, so 13%. Take these two combat signals, already up to 15%. So just really good in utilizing here. So you'll do more damage versus something like I think Buffalo has 34 millimeter pin. So you're just going to be like, oh, I feel like my high explosive does more damage than something like the Buffalo. And it is because of the quarter pin value versus the 1/6 pin value that the Buffalo has. Now, armor piercing, you didn't get to see me really give an example of this in yesterday's video. Armor piercing's good. I had a couple battles where I just switched to it and I citadeled cruisers. So if you have the opportunity, definitely utilize the armor piercing. Maximum damage 5,900. And because, again, these are 2 and 3 millimeter guns, you can do some spicy damage if you catch a battle cruiser, light cruiser, or even, depending on the battleship we're talking about, the really vulnerable citadels. You can do some nasty damage with them. So don't sleep on them, but most players, you're going to be firing high explosive most of the time. We talked about the torpedoes. I will again, just in case you jump to this part. So 90-second reload time, torpedo range 6 kilometers. So these are brawling torpedoes. They're not like Yoshino torpedoes, right? Maximum damage 13,700. You get 4 per side, so 8 total, with decent torpedo firing angles. Torpedo speed 64 knots, and an okay detectability range of 1.3. I mean, there's definitely worse in the game. So this is quite good. If you get much better than this, you tend to be looking more at deep water torpedoes. Depth charges. So these are ship-based depth charges, unfortunately. So you need to drive on top of the submarine and your cruiser here to do that, and that's just asking to get shotgunned if a decent submarine player understands that. So you won't be using them a lot, but you get 2 charges and 8 bombs in a charge, so 16 total. Reload time 40 seconds, maximum damage 2,200. Consumable wise, you have a standard damage control party, action time 5 seconds, cooldown time 60 seconds, and I say this is standard because it's a standard damage control party for a cruiser. Your repair party, you have HP per second plus 267 with India Delta. We can buff that up to 321. So if you're playing randoms, ranked clan battles with the Roon, I would recommend definitely taking India Delta combat signal. Action time 20 seconds, cooldown time 80 seconds. You get 4. Now the next slot we have the spotting aircraft. You also have fighter. Fighter it doesn't do much at all in World of Warships. Maybe, I mean, especially, okay, you're dealing with tier 8, tier 10, and super CVs. You're never going to stop the first strike. The fighters won't prevent the first strike unless the CV is just stupid and he flies into all of your flak. It can happen, but it's super rare. And the fighter maybe doesn't even get aggroed on the second or third drop. It should get aggroed on the second drop, but sometimes my fighters just have their finger up their nose and they're not doing anything. And it's really not worth it. The sweet spot with Roon, I say, is definitely taking the spotting aircraft consumable. I'm going to talk more about it with the commander. Remaining battery firing range plus 20%. Action time 100 seconds. Cooldown time 240 seconds. Now we talked about, where was that? Here. We could buff it up to 130 seconds action time. But I don't know if that's going to be so much needed, but we'll talk about that. Other slot, you have hydroacoustic search and defensive AA. The hydroacoustic search on the German ships in this game are legendary because detection of torpedoes 4 kilometers, detection of ships 6 kilometers. This is among the best hydroacoustic search in the game on the German cruisers, German battleships, and destroyers. So you really want to be taking hydroacoustic search. You're not an AA cruiser. If you wanted to do something AA at tier 9, you know, do something like with Seattle, Neptune, Buffalo, right? Those ships will just do better performance with AA, not Roon. In terms of remaining combat signals, I would take. I don't normally run the speed. I tend to lean towards having my consumables come off cooldown time that much quicker. So you can see the hydro, 120 seconds. Cooldown time for plane, 240. Now 114. Now we are 228. And then rather than having 80-second cooldown time on the repair party, it's 76. Then 57 instead of 60 on our DCP. So you get 4 consumables. So I just like running this. And this is what I tend to run here. And then I want to reduce the fire extinguishing time. So that's what I normally take here. Now on the commander, So I'm training up. Well, I guess I've got 2 commanders I'm training right now. I've put one on Hipper, and then this one will be moved on to Hindenburg when the time comes. And I might be respeccing it when the time comes for Hindenburg. So I'm going to just talk about my thoughts here on Roon with the commander. There's a few different ways you can go, and the difference between doing upgrade commander build video on Hipper to Roon is this guy, Eye in the Sky. So we will talk about that. First, let me just talk about a 10-point commander build. Okay, so I would build it in the last stand. Your engine, your steering gears will be incapacitated from time to time. So your ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with the engine, steering gears incapacitated. For me, this is really important to have, especially with the cruiser play here in World of Warships. It sucks to be dead in the water or your rudder being stuck and you're just turning back into the enemy push. So last stand is, I would say, a must to have on Roon, in my opinion. Now there's going to be some differences here when I talk about if you have a 3-point commander, whether or not priority target is worth it. If you'd rather give it up for something else. And it's going to go into our 2-3 possible builds you could do here on the commander. But for now, in general, I'm just going to recommend priority target. This just gives you a number of how many enemy ships are targeting your ship with their main battery guns. And if you struggle with map awareness or map awareness and situational awareness, priority target is very, very helpful. I like having priority target. It just helps me be that much more aware. And you saw yesterday in the Friday video, we had to be mindful, right? Because there was some battleships trying to flank us. And so we repositioned, we re-angled our armor, and we did A-okay. 6 points build, I would say go for Adrenaline Rush. This is just going to help your guns reload that much quicker. You're going to drop from a 9.2 second reload time to beneath 9, 8.5, 8, maybe 7.7, 7.8, depending on how much hit points you have. So I like taking Adrenaline Rush. Now, if it's not that big of a deal to you, then I would say just go ahead and pick up Survivability Expert. But I take Adrenaline Rush first and foremost, and we're going to have a fast reload time on our torpedoes. 10-point build, Consumables Expert, ship's tactical range, negative 10%. So we build into 11.3 by sea, 6.5 by air. Okay, after this, for the 11-point build, I would pick up Grease the Gears. Because otherwise it's really painful. Now, if you go from a 10-point to 11-point isn't that big of a as many Elite Commander XP. So if you're just like, I really want to grease the gears, you could spend a little bit, so rather than playing a couple battles. Or some other players, it might just annoy you so much you want to grease the gears first before last stand. You could do that. But 11 points for myself, I picked up Grease the Gears. And then on 14 points, I picked up Survivability Expert. So our survivability is 53,600 versus being, I think it's like 49, 48? Can't fully remember. But that's helps you overall. And I think really great to have here. Now, at this point, there's going to be some different avenues you can go. So let me just share a very standard one. Okay, this would be my standard upgrade commander build I would do on Roon. Next, probably what I would do is I would pick up Superintendent. So I would have 5 heals, 4 hydroacoustic searches, and 5 spotter planes. Okay. So in yesterday's video, I think I burned through all my heals. I didn't, maybe I still had some hydro left. I don't remember. I think I used 2 at least. And it's going to give us another spotter plane, which is important because in the next skill I'm going to talk about here in a minute. I, myself as a player, I'm a player who tends to live towards the last half of the battle. So this skill makes a lot of sense for me. Because I know the key moments in most battles is the last half of the battle, besides not talking about blowout matches, right? But I tend to live the last half of the battle and making those key plays. So I appreciate having each one of these consumables because you're on the consumable, more heavier side with Roon. You maybe most cruisers, you maybe only get 2 consumables, not talking about damage control party. Then I would go for Eye in the Sky. Now, Wargaming buffed this skill a couple updates ago. So it used to also we'd cut your action time of your spotter aircraft in half. They took that away. So now it's only good. So there's no nerfs in taking this skill. The spotting aircraft consumable cooldown time, negative 50%. Okay, with November Foxtrot and such, our cooldown time is 228 seconds. So that means we'll have our spotter plane back in 114 seconds, if I did the math there correctly in my head. Okay, and you get 2 more additional spotter planes, right? So without this skill, because we don't have it mastered, right, we'd go from 4 to 6. With this one, we go to 7. We get 7 spotter planes. It's very nice to have, and helping you have more of those accurate salvos at longer range. And I feel rather comfortable in doing that here with Roon. Now, the other skill, talking about the fire chance, we buffed it from 13 to 15% with our 2 combat signals. We then could take Demolition Expert. So now we're bumping it up to 16% fire chance for 9 guns every 9.2 seconds or less, depending if your Drone Rush is active. Okay, that's not a bad build. I would say overall this is a pretty good standard build to have here on Roon. One that makes a lot of sense. Now, you could make one minor adjustment here if you wanted. If you're really wanting to have the gun feeder, I would tell you to give up priority target, take gun feeder, and take incoming fire alert. Gun feeder reduces your shell switching time to by negative 40%. So if you want to switch between a high explosive, from high explosive to armor piercing, because the cruiser just is about to go broadside, right? That becomes really useful there. Incoming fire alert gives you a warning when a salvo is fired at your ship from a distance of more than 4.5 kilometers. So if you're really wanting that, I would say give a priority target and pick up these 2. These kind of function the same, just you don't know if someone's targeting you until this alert goes off that there's a ship that's greater distance than 4.5 kilometers has fired upon you, right? This is something that I would even be tempted to do here if I'm going for the standard build here on Roon, to give up my priority target and take incoming fire alert and gun feeder. Because I have, in general, my skill, I have a pretty good map awareness in terms of what's being fired at me, ship positioning, right? So just having a heads up and then being able to switch to my AP, maybe that would be of better value to me. Now, the other thing to talk about is, what if you want something like top grade gunner? This would be also very doable to have here. You'd still have 5 heals, 4 hydroacoustic searches, and 5 spotter planes. But you get a permanent effect on your secondary battery reload time, negative 10%. Oh my gosh, I just saw that I'm talking for more than 33 minutes. I apologize. And your main battery reload time, if your ship is detected within its standard detectability range, which right now is 11.3 kilometers, we would have a buff in our reload time. Now, the video you saw yesterday, majority of that battle, this can be activated effect for our main battery reload time would not have happened. Probably only a minute of that 20-minute game would have this skill been active. So that's like, oh, do I want that, right? Because I have that max conceal. If you're going for a Lighthouse build, you give up Concealment Expert, still take Superintendent, and then you're picking up Eye in the Sky. So then that leaves you with 2 more points, and then you're picking up Demolition Expert for the additional fire chance, if you're going for the Lighthouse build. So these skills, give up Concealment Expert, take Eye in the Sky, take Demolition Expert. Because when you give up your concealment, you start getting up, I think, over 14 and maybe 15 kilometer detectability by sea, which means this skill is going to be active much more regularly. Okay? So that's my input here. Now you could still do, if you're doing Lighthouse, you could give up priority target. You still have Eye in the Sky, Demolition Expert, and then you take these 2 skills, right? That's still doable. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this video up. If you have questions about something I didn't cover, let me know in the comments below. And if you have Roon, let me know what you run on your ship, whether it be upgrades or commander. And if you have maybe some tips and advice that you can share with the community below in the comments. So if you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I would appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time. Take care.